Okay, my name is Adam, but I never really stress it to people. It's pronounced Adom. It's pronounced Adom. It is a West African name, coming from the West African language of tree. The second letter in the word is like a R and a W mixed together, so tree. And it comes from Ghana, West Africa. The translation of it would be grace. So essentially, my name translates to grace. And I never really stress it to people because nobody really ever gets it right. I've only had a handful of people who like actually care and call me Adom, and they never say Adom, but like I really like the effort of Adom. So like I really like this. I was born here in Houston, Texas, but I was way too young to remember that. As the farthest back I can remember would be Tallahassee, Florida. That's where my mother went to college, and that's essentially where I spent like most of my like young childhood. Up until around the age of, I'd say 5, I was in Tallahassee, Florida, and I had some very interesting experiences there because growing up in like southern areas in the United States, I've been like rural areas and urban areas such as like Houston versus Tallahassee, for example. And so like while I was out there, I did definitely experience like some racism. And so from there, I went to Ghana, West Africa. So Florida is a very culturally diverse place, but it is still very like racially divided as far as like the social lines are. And so West Africa, I feel like in Ghana, socially they're much better, and morally they're much better than here in the U.S. Just because of things I've seen here in the U.S. and things that I saw out there. Like out there, freshman year, let's just go to freshman year. Like I saw a guy who got stabbed in the back of the head because people were trying to rob him for some money. When I was out there in Ghana, West Africa, I didn't see anything like that. And it was like a party was every day. Everybody in the community knew each other. Everybody was really nice, and there wasn't this sort of like I'll get mine, you get yours type of mentality. Because here in the U.S., it's sort of like we're like so anti-poverty and so like cash driven that we've sort of developed a selfish mindset. And so when you think about it, like everything in life or that we experience growing up in the U.S. is setting you up for money, wage slavery, and death. And out there, there's more of a focus on, like happiness, joy, and things of that nature. So opportunity-wise, the U.S. is definitely a much better place, but culturally, socially, ethically, and morally, I prefer Ghana a million times over. From Ghana, I came back to Houston, of course. For a while, I stayed in Manville, Texas, and that was where I experienced more racism. But it was different. Like in Florida, I had a teacher throw an apple at me. Here, when I went to a school called E.C. Mason, I had a teacher who like pulled my hair. She used to put me in groups by myself. But from there, we went back to my grandmother's house because from Florida, I went to stay at my grandmother's house for a short time, like roughly about half a year probably, before we went to Ghana. Came back to my grandmother's house and I went to school in Manville. I wasn't living out there. But yeah, in my grandmother's neighborhood, things probably weren't the best. I experienced third grade because I went to second grade out there in Ghana. Third grade, that I guess you could say this were sort of my like quote unquote hood endeavors. But the mentality changed as I got older. When I was younger, my dad was living in New York. And in Ghana, I didn't really see him at all either. Like, I rarely saw my dad when we were in Florida. But I think my parents got back together in the fourth grade. But during the third grade, I had some pretty hard times with staying at my grandmother's house because my mother, she was working a lot of the time. And so my uncle, I was abused by him. I was like physically abused by him. And his reasoning behind that was apparently like, oh, I want to make sure he's strong as a young black male without his father figure. And so I think that's where like my independence came from, and my will to understand people and their actions for doing things, because I really didn't want to have hatred towards my uncle for that, because I was trying to be understanding of, oh, he didn't have a father figure and he's trying to prepare me for life, because when he was growing up out here in this same neighborhood at this exact same house I'm at, he had troubles that he knows that I'm going to face. So he wants to prepare me for what he went through, and it might not be the best thing for him, like it might not be the best way for him to do it, but he's making an effort. So I can respect him in that regard. I've seen a lot of affiliation. I've seen people murdered because of affiliation, of things that like they didn't even do. So it's just a matter of being understanding, I guess you could say, which is why I approach everything from an understanding, like, from a will to understand, with a will to understand. Well, we'll start with dance. My mother actually went to PVA for dance. And so I just kind of grew up in a household where like I was encouraged to dance. She would play music and I could just like do whatever little movements I wanted to do. And over time I just sort of got better at it, because at first I was just like flailing around and moving my shoulders. I used to do this little thing right here, and like my mom would encourage it, even though it was like the dumbest fucking move I could ever make. I look back on videos and I'm like, oh my God, what was I doing? Oh, these are Whoppers? I love Whoppers. Okay, so anyway, yeah, but anything involved with music primarily was because of like the household I was raised in. But most of my hobbies stem from a will to better my existence, because I was considering what it truly meant, like, to exist, and like what is my reason for living. And that was something I was questioning heavily in freshman year. Like, what reason do I have to be here, and what do I really want to do? Like, what do I truly feel outside of like this little system and imaginary world that we've created as humans? Because this whole little, I guess, thing we've created sort of contradicts our very nature and murders the things that give us life. Like, humans in and of themselves could be described as a suicidal race, because nearly all of our inventions murder us and our environment. And so I was considering, well, on a completely natural level, what do I truly want? And I was like, well, I want to be free. Now, for freedom, you need 4 things. You need allergies are acting up. You need freedom. You need independence, self-sufficiency, self-control, and self-expression. And so I wanted to bring all of those things to their highest level within myself. So I wanted to be able to, like, for example, independence. That would mean, like, to be independent, you need to defend yourself first off. And you need to be able to better yourself, like, as you're sitting here alone. So I wanted to be able to express myself to the freest level possible, but that also requires a certain level of control, so you can be free to do whatever you want, because your body has that capacity. You've gained enough control for that to happen. So I wanted to make control and freedom interchangeable in a sense within myself. So to express myself physically would be why I practice martial arts and dance, and why I practice capoeira specifically, because it's a martial art and it's a dance. And the specific reason I chose capoeira was because the African slaves brought from Angola, which is in West Africa, to Brazil, practiced this art form as a way to rebel against the government that was keeping them down. So most of the things I do are to make myself free, in a sense. So, like, how would you free your emotions? Well, that's why I write poetry and music. and that's why I sing. How would you express your emotions physically? Oh, well, I dance, I do martial arts. So that way I don't have to rely on some sort of external source for my own stability. My stability comes from things that I do. My ideas are inspired by problems I see that I would like to recreate and sort of use visual arts as a way to communicate. So in that sense, it wouldn't even be freeing myself, because visual arts is a little bit different. I'm not in the moment doing something. I'm creating something to stand by itself. So I'm creating something in and of itself that is a replication of my independence. So if I have a message or something I want to get out in the form of like sculpture, painting, drawing, whatever the case may be, that has to be able to stand alone in and of itself without me being there. And so in that sense, I would say visual arts is different, because it's like if you're doing spoken word, or you're reciting a poem, or you're showing a song, or you're dancing, or anything else, in that moment, you're independent and you're free and you're expressing yourself and you're getting this out. However, with visual arts, it's different. I take this sculpture and I set it down, and now that is a representation of what I'm feeling on the inside. In that sense, visual arts becomes a mirror. And so the way that my own experiences have, sort of manifested themselves in my art is by recreating the conclusions I've come to in my head in a physical sense. So my most recent piece is in response to my friend who was murdered this summer. And I thought about it, and I came to terms with it. And I've known this person since I was really young, probably since I was around like 5. And from this experience, I can now create a piece of art, because once I worked through the issue, I decided I'm gonna make a sound piece about it. And I made a poem, and I mixed and mastered and I put some things together to make like a sound piece. And something that really inspired that was Tupac's poem, "The Rose That Grew from Concrete." So now the sculpture I'm creating is two roses coming out of concrete, tied together with a white bandana, because a white bandana is what he was wearing when he was murdered. And so in that sense, I would say all of art in and of itself is self-expression, but at the same time, it's therapy. Like, you don't necessarily need someone else to communicate with if you're your own best friend. Yeah. I don't believe in God, and I don't really believe in a omniscient or omnipotent being in the sky floating around, sort of granting people Christmas presents. My beliefs are rooted in what is logical and what I can feel. And so when you think about it, everything that exists is literally a vibration, because have you heard that like story like, oh, two things are never really touching because the electrons bounce off each other? Turns out that's bullshit, because in a scientific study recently, they were able to overlap two atoms literally with the nuclei almost touching each other. And this is because the electrons don't behave as particles. It's not a particle, it's a wave. Everything is a vibration. This is a vibration. The light, the reason I can see you right now is a vibration. The very sound that people are gonna hear from this interview is a vibration. And so, allergies. Repeat the question. Basically, there is one base primal energy that is existent in everything, and it comes from the same source. So it sort of has like a unifying will. So I guess I do believe in fate and things of that nature, but I believe like everything that exists together forms what would be considered this like omniscient, omnipotent thing. But I think it's just a base primal energy. Like, you are a part of it, I'm a part of it, this table's a part of it. And so the thing that I would consider as I guess the other side would be what I was talking about at the beginning of the interview, like human constructs. So like I'm a really big, I guess, pioneer or like advocate for like things that don't necessarily harm the environment. But this is because of my entire life philosophy, which states that because humans in and of themselves could be considered a suicidal race, that contradicts that base primal energy. And so in that sense, we must strive to not destroy what is. It's not necessarily that I believe we are connected to the earth. I believe everything is connected all at the same time.
Right.
Me and you are part of that same universal mind, in a sense, because there's one unifying like logic. There's one unifying like energy or like force. So because all energy comes from the same place, even in like multiple belief systems you look at, because of that, everything that exists sort of, I guess, is unified.